Hi, this is Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson.
What's up, everybody? I'm Matt Leinart, 2004 Heisman Trophy winner.
Hey, I'm Zane Gonzalez.
Hi, I'm Matt Barry from ESPN. You're getting ready to watch one of the best college football podcasts ever. It's the Harris Highlight Show.
You're watching the Harris Highlight Show.
And you're watching the Harris Highlight Show.
And you're listening to the Harris Highlight Show. Enjoy it.
Na 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 na.
Coming to you live from beautiful Monrovia, California. This is a very special Thursday edition of the Harris Highlight Show. Joining me this week, as always, is our college football expert, Josh Schaefer, our college football analyst, Lyle Goldstein, our executive producer, Brady Klain, and I am your host for the evening, Blake Harris. Boys, it's a Thursday edition episode. We pitched this on our show on Tuesday. Every week we do a show on Tuesday, but with how much is going on currently in college football, how much news has come out the past week, we thought that doing it, on the side of another show wouldn't have been enough. So we thought, let's make a separate show for it, talk about everything that's going on. But I know it's only been, 48 hours since we all saw each other last, but I have to ask, it's in my contract. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
What is this?
I'm doing well.
What is this contract you're speaking of?
Oh, did the interns not give you the newest contracts that were sent out last week?
No.
Are we getting paid?
Not yet.
I have the interns at my house right now. I can bring them right here and yell at them if you want me to.
You might have to. What's everyone been up to today? How's everyone doing?
Played a little golf today. It was a good day.
Nice weather in Indy.
It was overcast the entire day with a little bit of rain. Kind of felt like playing in Scotland.
Nice.
So it was great golf weather, and now it's sunny and like 85 degrees.
Well, I think is that nice weather to play in?
It's perfect.
Okay,
it's like the best.
Not a golfer, but I'm just curious because I like that kind of weather.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
I will say this. This happened yesterday, but aren't you guys glad we aren't a verified Twitter account?
Yeah.
Yes, we
never
would have been able to put down our down payment on the naming rights to New Era Stadium.
Yeah, the Harris Highlight Show Stadium. Hey, man, I haven't seen anyone else getting a bid. So, guys, as of right now, I think we're the winning bid with $10,000.
I think
which
so.
Will come up from my pocket, by the way. You guys don't have to chip in. You guys can chip in like $20 or so. It's all coming from me. I'll chip in 22 just for you.
I got to backtrack here a second.
It's going to be Blake Harris Field at Harris Highlight Stadium.
Are you guys really calling? I got to backtrack here for a second. I know this is on brand for me. Are you guys really calling overcast and rainy nice weather?
All right, look, mister, I'm from Seattle. It rains 24/7, and I don't know what the sun looks like. It doesn't rain here. So, my reaction is overcast means cool, with the air coming in from the ocean. And
I just feel like,
No, I'm going to say it was completely overcast. There was a nice breeze. So it was total different change of pace from the normal 95 and humid here. There was really no humidity, had a little bit of rain. It was a great day for golf. It was good golf weather. I'm not saying it was good overall, like sunny weather. It was just great golf weather today.
I just figured anybody who likes rain is in some small minority population on their own. Like even if you live in Arizona or California or wherever, I feel like if you like rain, you're in a very small minority of people.
Lyle, you saying you don't like rain because you're so used to it is like Blake and Josh saying they don't like the sunshine because it's from California. That's asinine. That's ridiculous.
No, most people don't like rain, I feel like.
I love the rain.
Okay, so rain, it depends because, for example, somebody from a place where it doesn't rain all the time, like where it does for you, I enjoy when the rain comes. Nobody knows how to drive, especially in Arizona. Good Lord. People in Arizona don't know how to drive when it's sunny outside. Let's just throw that out there. But then somebody pours a little bucket of rain on or water on the ground. Dude, everybody in Arizona is going to lose their mind. That's beside the point, though.
Traffic goes 20 miles an hour slower than what it normally does, too.
It's ridiculous. And the best part about Arizona drivers is they're all like, oh, dude, I know, I'm awful. But when it rains, I'm 10 times worse. That's everybody from Arizona. Anyway, you like the rain in different situations. So, like, if it's overcast and drizzling at my house in the San Fernando Valley, that's great. But if it's overcast and drizzling when I drive 25 minutes to the beach, it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Worst thing ever.
This was great. You know, I'm known for wearing a quarter zip all the time, and I didn't even wear a quarter zip while golfing today. Surprisingly enough, it was like 70 degrees, a slight breeze, and a little bit of drizzle, and I didn't wear a quarter zip.
Yeah. Well, as Eric P says it perfectly, isn't this a sports show? So
We're talking about golf,
guys.
so yes, we are.
There you go. We have a few things to get to first and foremost, and that is follow the show on Twitter at the HH Show _. Make sure you guys go get a follow. If you're not already, we'll give you guys a personal shout out if you go and follow it this very second. We just hit 1,000 followers the other day, so thank you guys so much. Lots of great stuff there to go follow on, and plus some behind the scenes footage. So again, if you haven't already, go follow the show at the HH Show _. And plus, you guys can go vote in our ACC realignment that we did the other day. Guys, I'm currently in the lead. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to it. I'm in the lead. Josh is in second. Brady's in third. Lyle, I think you have like 4% of the votes. Sorry, bud. People just hand you for whatever reason. So again, if you're not already, make sure you go follow us on Twitter at the HH Show _. I'll give some personal shout outs if you guys go follow sometime soon. Again, you guys can now listen to the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You guys can just go over there, search those up. The link's in the description as well. We have a lot of people that have been listening if they can't watch the show live. So again, if you have to miss a show, or if you just, somehow don't know there's a show, you can go to the app. You guys can see that we did a show, and you guys can listen wherever you are. Next thing, as we talked about on Twitter the other day, you guys can help the show out via the super chat, which is right there in the live chat. You can donate $1, maybe donate $2. It helps us out. 3 of these guys are unemployed. Unfortunately, I myself, well, when you're running the greatest podcast of all time, it doesn't really feel like a job, guys, because when every day when you're doing something you love, that's not a job.
Every day, this is the first time we've ever done it more than once in a week.
You're the worst person I know.
Speaking of donating, guys, you guys can become Patreon members for little as $1 a month. That's only $12 a year, and you guys can help out the show. We just actually unveiled a new bonus for if you just donate $1 a month, you're in an entry to win a Zoom call with the 4 of us. We're going to do it once a month. So if you don't want to have a Zoom call with us, if you guys want to talk college football, talk about whatever's going on, just, talk about, as I did in our tweet, why Lyle doesn't like dogs, why Josh loves SC more than anything in this world, why Brady takes amazing photos. If you guys would like the chance, and translation of like, I like money, well done, Brady. Again, this goes to help out the show. We have this new format, this new StreamYard, we go on Spotify, we go on Apple Podcasts, and to help out the cost of the new microphones. Again, $1 a month. And who knows, you help the show out and you have a chance to talk with us. So all that information also is in the description of this video. But guys, enough of going over that. This is my favorite comment right here. Blake is broke. King highlights? No. I mean, I guess technically, who knows? Guys, we have a lot to get to today. And first and foremost, did I not take the comment off, or did Brady just put it back?
I clicked this one. You're watching the show. This is essentially like Zooming with us. Come on.
Pretty much. All right, Brady, you can take that one off. I don't know what even you're doing right now. But guys, college football. Is there going to be a season? This past week, essentially, we learned that non-conference games, those are essentially no more. I think all 5 power conferences have made it official. I mean, some of them, like they're essentially going to do it. I just don't know if they've officially confirmed it yet, but essentially Power 5, and I guess for Group of Fives, all that stuff, there's going to be no non-conference games. It's strictly going to be conference only. So I want to get you guys' initial thoughts on this. Is it a smart decision dropping the non-conference games and sticking to a conference-only schedule?
I mean, the tough part is we talked about this the other day in our group chat before we even did the show. I think we talked about this like Saturday or Sunday. What happens with Notre Dame? And the good thing for the Irish, and obviously Lyle can touch on that too, is that they're going to play in the ACC this year, so that's good. But the way that I look at it is I understand how it's going to limit contact with other teams, especially from across the country. And I guess, you're going to be playing in a more, confined region if you're playing just your conference games. But something Blake pointed out, and I kind of been thinking about this a lot lately. What does that really do? What does it really do? Because you're already getting tested when you go in and when you leave, and then if you're playing different teams from across the country, what does that really do? So I guess that's just my one question. I don't have any problems with it other than the fact that you're not going to see games like Florida State or USC Notre Dame. You're not going to get those this year. Georgia Tech, Georgia. So those are disappointing. But I just think there are a lot of questions that go into it.
I mean, I think it's smart because you're trying to limit the amount of people you see and the amount of traveling you do. So kind of based on what going off what Josh said about USC Notre Dame, if those two teams play, and this year they're slated to play at the end of the year in California, or they were before everything was canceled. I mean, think about all the different teams that these guys are going to see. USC was supposed to open against Alabama week 1. That's an SEC team. Then they go and see a bunch of Pac-12 teams, while Notre Dame's playing everybody from across the country, between Clemson to Wisconsin to a bunch of other ACC teams. And then they travel across to play USC at the end of the year. These guys have seen a ton of different people and been exposed to a ton of different players. I think the idea is, even if it's not a perfect solution, the attempted solution is to try and minimize the amount of people you're seeing. That's what you do if you play these conference games. So instead of these teams playing each other at the end of the year and having seen a whole bunch of different teams and players, you minimize it. Everybody's basically seeing the same teams and players that you'd see just playing a conference-only schedule. And you try to kind of minimize the damage as best you can.
I just want to quickly say before Brady goes, just replying to this comment. Yeah, Big Ten and Pac-12 are I think the only ones that have done it officially. But I know like the ACC, SEC, Big 12, it hasn't been done yet. It's going to happen, whether it's in the coming days, the coming weeks. They've all pretty much talked about this. There's not going to be any conference games. As Josh touched on, the whole ACC thing, how Notre Dame's going to join the ACC. So again, while some of these might be official, it's pretty much going to be all of them that eventually adapt this.
Yeah, so I actually drew it out on my whiteboard here. And
well done.
I sort of drew a visualization of what Lyle said. So you have your team up top. They're playing one game, all right? This is the first game. You play this team. This team has played that team, which has played that team, which has played that team. It's just a big spread of people.
It's a pyramid scheme.
It's a pyramid scheme is all it is. So say this is Ohio State and they're playing Oregon, and Oregon played ASU and ASU played USC. USC, you have all this interaction with teams. Whereas when you're playing a conference-only schedule, you're going to be confined to the same teams. So you're exposed to the same teams. You're exposed to the same people. You're exposed to the same whoever. And I'm kind of surprised. I'm not surprised they did this. I brought this up about 2 weeks ago to you guys in our group chat and said, I saw something where teams are considering going conference only. Excuse me. I saw something where they're going conference only. And I don't remember who it was, but they brought up the point of this there where you keep things condensed. You play only in the Big Ten. You're playing only with those teams. So instead of it being a pyramid scheme like this, it's more circular. So instead of having this team play a non-conference team who played a non-conference team who played a conference team and it all combining together to meet at the top, you're sticking in a circular pattern. You're exposing yourself to the same people. You're exposing yourself to the same teams. Yes, it's every other week or it's week, but the amount of interaction with you have with teams that you don't need to interact with in half.
Yeah, I mean, when it came out and this whole thing, I'm just not a fan. I mean, me being the college football fan, of course, I want to see all these non-conference games happen. But the more I'm, reading into it and how it makes sense, like I totally get it. You want to limit yourself to a certain amount of teams that are going to have a certain amount of exposure. So, it's really tough. But I understand essentially why they got to do it. I mean, it's not going to make a huge difference, by having these teams not play each other. It's not like it's going to be detrimental where it saves everything, but I think it will little by little make some more sense. But the next question I wanted to ask you guys is, should they keep the non-conference games, but maybe take out a few conference games? So essentially, instead of playing a 12-game schedule, maybe you take out, 2 conference games and you keep 1 non-conference game. That way it's 9. And again, it's probably not as fully, safe as this whole keep it within kind of your own bubble of teams that at least this way you're still limiting your opponents. Maybe you can work something out where you can like rearrange the schedule where your non-conference game you're playing, maybe some other teams in your conference play them. I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on maybe shortening a season, but you get to keep a non-conference game or two.
Can I jump in real quick? I have a quick thought on that where you look at the Pac-12 schedule. They play what? ASU will play what? 2 teams in the North this year? 3 teams from the North? You scrap those if you do this at all. I'm saying if. I'm not saying you should because I think it should be kept in conference right now. If you do that, you scrap the 3 games that are in your division, and those 3 could be your non-conference games.
Yeah, I mean that. Go ahead, Josh.
Wow.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I mean, that's an option. I just think that might get vetoed down just because of, again, the whole safety aspect. Look, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see some of these non-conference games happen, and I know we're going to touch on some of the possible ones that ended up getting canceled later in the show. But I think that's still the idea of too much travel, too much exposure to other people, and too much leaving your own bubble, where if you keep it within your own conference, it just kind of maintains the safety. Again, this is a weird year. Obviously, it's going to be like nothing we've ever seen, but for really trying to minimize damage, I think it's safer to just play teams in your conference, even if it's on the opposite side of your conference, than go play those non-conference games. Because even if at the end of the year, these teams go and play the playoff and they play the national title, well, there's probably going to be a month off in between the final game of the year and the playoff like there always is. So that gives these players all the time to quarantine and rest and get healthy before the postseason.
My biggest concern is there's just no uniformity anywhere. I mean, the MLS is doing one thing, the NBA is doing one thing, the NHL is doing one thing, Major League Baseball is doing one thing, college football wants to do something completely different entirely. Meanwhile, the government is doing its own thing. There's just nothing there's no uniformity amongst any of the sports, which makes no sense to me because you've got teams or you've got leagues like the MLS, and I guess the NHL too, where they're just kind of splitting everybody up. So the NHL splitting the 2 conferences between Toronto and Edmonton in Canada. The NBA is having everybody in Orlando. The MLS is taking everybody out to Florida too, I'm pretty sure. But then Major League Baseball is still, you can call it a bubble if you want, but that's not what it is. Everybody's still playing their home games. It's not only in division. It's not only in the National League or the American League. I guess they're kind of breaking that up into regions, but it's so different from sport to sport, which I think makes no sense. And meanwhile, we haven't really heard much about the NFL either. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because I feel like everybody's throwing out all of these ideas. Nobody's working with other leagues to figure out what the actual, what the best option is. And there's a possibility that we don't have college football in the fall.
How about this?
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. Here's a quick proposal here is you make a new NCAA 21 video game and you have teams play their schedules on the video game instead of actually playing in real life.
I'm down.
I'm so down for that.
Here's the only thing based off what you were talking about, Josh, is it's a little different in every – I agree there hasn't been much uniformity, but it's a little different in every league because each scenario is different. For example, it's hard to create a bubble for college football with so many teams and so many players and so many schools as opposed to the NBA where they didn't even bring all 30 teams. It's just the teams that are in competition, and eventually the teams that are eliminated before the playoffs are just going to leave. So I think college football is going a little more the route of what baseball is because you're staying in your own section in a sense because these conferences, for the most part, are based on sections. And that's what baseball is kind of doing too. You're playing a division in your own section with, for example, the AL West and the NL West, you're staying on the West Coast, or the Central teams are staying in the Central. So I think there's been a little bit of pulling ideas from each different sport because each situation is different. But yes, there hasn't been a whole lot of uniformity as a whole, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lyle took what I was going to say, where for these other leagues, it's kind of easier to do, where at college, it's tough because they kind of have to do what the MLBs do and how they have to play in their home stadiums. And it'll just be interesting to see because there hasn't really been any thorough plan they've kind of tried to announce yet. Where I think Brett McMurphy today tweeted that the odds of the college football season now starting on like the planned date is like a 0.0 GPA. So obviously now there's talks where the college football is going to be pushed back. But what does that do? Do you make it a thing where you still have however many games they do, the same amount of home games, same amount of road games? I'm not exactly sure. I think it is. I mean, maybe they're still trying to figure out what these other conferences are going to do, but it does seem weird. Like the season, was supposed to start 6-7 weeks from now or so, and there's nothing. I mean, maybe there's a lot, in the works right now, a lot being discussed that we don't know about. But I just think, how there's just nothing that we're hearing. I just don't think it's a good sign for anything. But who knows? Maybe they have some, mega plan. Maybe it's not like a bubble like what the NBA is doing. Maybe they have something planned that's going to be safe for these athletes, safe for these teams. But I just don't know, guys. At this point, I just don't know.
I will say
go into the comment section real quick, Brady. So there's a comment from Kejwan Neal or Kiwan Neal. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you can put that up, yeah, this is a good point. So for those that aren't watching this live, it says, as a former college athlete, I do not think that we should have college sports this year. Professional and college are different. These college kids are not being paid to risk their lives like professionals. And I think that's a good point. And I think it's also worth pointing out that I feel like universities kind of have a say on what they want to do in terms of bringing students back on campus, let alone student athletes, but just students back on campus in general. And I guess that kind of goes back and forth between whether it's a state school, whether it's a private school, whatever. But if the government wants to bring students back on campus in the fall across the education system, whatever that might be, if they want to bring students back in the fall, then is that separate from college sports? Because who's to say that we should even have student athletes on campus anyway? Because, for example, like professional baseball players are saying, I have an underlying condition, or I have 2 kids and a wife. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself in that situation. Can these college athletes do the same thing? Or would they feel pressured to coming back thinking, oh, if I sit out, I lose a year of eligibility, or like I lose my starting spot? Where in so many other professional sports, I think players who are being paid and have a contract and are making money every single year, they're not necessarily concerned about that risk.
One of the things that we've seen, especially in the last 2 or 3 days, and one of the leagues that is in a bubble as well, this is a WNBA. You see Elena Delle Donne, reigning MVP, multiple-time champion, one of the best WNBA players of all time. She has Lyme disease. She says she takes 65 pills a day. And the NBA or the WNBA said to her that her condition wouldn't warrant her sitting out. And she said she was debating on sitting out. You can either sit out and forfeit your paycheck or play and get your paycheck. If you have a medical exemption, essentially like you're going on the injured list, you can still not play and get your paycheck. Like was said in the comments, these college players aren't getting a paycheck. They're not getting benefits for playing at a professional level. So opting out, Josh, like you said a minute ago, is what's the most to fear about? To lose your job, to lose your starting job, your scholarship, your year of eligibility, whatever it may be. So yes, there are some professional athletes who aren't playing because of these conditions they have, but they have the ability to not play because of the paychecks they've have accumulated. Whereas these college athletes, I think it should be up to them completely. And they shouldn't lose a year of eligibility. And if there aren't students on campus, there shouldn't be students on the field. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to pick and choose? Because they say they're student athletes, right? They're not athlete students. They're student athletes. The NCAA emphasizes that. Obviously, some schools and some teams don't. But student comes before athlete. And so if you're going to have these students campus-wide not be on campus, how are you expecting a select group of athletes to come and join your campus? I don't see how that could work.
Yeah, I obviously this is an idea that it's never going to happen, but I was just thinking of how like the NBA is doing this bubble where they have like I think the 3 different arenas. Just imagine if they did it where probably like maybe group of 5 teams kicking in on this, but a bunch of like FCS Division II they probably couldn't. But I'm talking maybe just like mainly Power 5. You take like the Pac-12, and let's say you set up camp in Los Angeles. For the most part, I think all these college campuses across the country I don't think they're going to have in-session classes. So you take, SC, UCLA, whatever, and the Pac-12, they just set a base, on the campus. You can have some teams live like in the USC dorms, the UCLA dorms, maybe some of those like Cal State, whatever teams that are around the area. And then you have it where they're all within, like a bubble. College students might be a little tougher to restrict than these professional athletes, where I'm sure it's going to be tough to say you guys can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. That might be kind of tough. And then every Saturday you have games at the Coliseum, at the Rose Bowl. We have one game at 12, you have one game at 4, then you have another game like at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and you do the same for the Rose Bowl. I know that'll never happen. I'm just saying,
StubHub
like,
Center. If you're not going to have fans, why not throw them at StubHub Center? Throw them at the new stadium.
Yeah,
SoFi.
there's different stadiums, or even the new Rams Charger Stadium. Again, I'm not saying this can never happen. And then you could do the thing for like the Big 12, where you set up camp across all the different colleges. Of course, I'm not too familiar with how close all these schools are to one another, but I'm sure there's a certain area where they're all within each other. Again, this is something that would never happen. I'm just going outside the box saying it's not the craziest thing, but again, because they are college athletes, they're not getting paid, and there's 90, 100 on each team. It's kind of tough to keep. I mean, just the NBA bubble, there's 15 players for 20 teams, and you got guys that are going to get DoorDash, you got guys that are kind of going out of the way, and that's kind of seems like a mess. So again, I know for a fact this would never happen. I'm just proposing it would be kind of cool if they just made these massive bubbles, and like on Saturday, the Coliseum was hosting 3 games and the Rose Bowl was hosting 3 games.
I will say this: some of the content that's been put out from the NBA bubble has just been immaculate. It's been top tier.
This league, as they say, as the kids say these days.
Lyle, was this whole thing rigged by the NBA or no?
No, it wasn't. Not this time.
But what Blake just said, I think you kind of indirectly made a point there.
Yeah.
A lot of these college football teams, think about how big they are compared to other sports that are going on right now. I know, obviously, Major League Baseball has expanded its roster size, at least for the time being, and you can have those taxi squads. But, like, you have 22 dudes in a dugout. Like, for college football, there's like 70 guys on the sidelines.
More. Way more.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it can be way more. But in the NFL, what? 40?
53.
53 is like it's just when you have that many people there, I think that's also something to take notice of too, because you think about it, like in the MLS, the NFL is the same sport, but still smaller roster size, or still reduced numbers on the sidelines. But in all of these other sports, the numbers are so much smaller compared to college football. So, and a lot of them have massive coaching staffs too. So
yeah,
it's just way more bodies all thrown together.
Yeah. So it's tough. I mean, obviously we would like to see it happen. We'd like to see this somehow managed, but I mean, that's something that can't be done.
Also, you look at some of these smaller schools that don't have the budget or don't have the monetary ability to test players every single day, to put their teams up in a bubble for a 10-week season, to stay in a hotel or dorms for a 10-week season. You look at a MAC school. Yes, I know obviously we said just do Power 5, but how can you just do some and not the other? We look at a MAC school that's has a smaller budget versus Alabama, which has just indisposable money. They have fun coupons. So the differentiation between conferences and even schools in the same conference is pretty big.
Yeah. And again, I know that this whole bubble idea, that it would never happen. I mean, there's no way it would go through. Again, it's just something that I like to see, because again, I want to see a college football season happen. I want there to be football played. And again, it could work, stranger things have happened. But guys, moving on, as we mentioned, it looks like all the non-conference games are going to be canceled for the most part. There were some good ones that were on slate for this upcoming year. There were some good ones. I know some people have come out. I think like Wisconsin, Notre Dame. I think that was the game where they were supposed to be at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, they came out and they said they're going to try to reschedule that one. They want to make sure that game is played in a year or two. So I know some of these matchups, they've talked about it. I think it was like Alabama came out and they said they still want to play SC. They still want to play them week 1. So again, some of these matchups, they're still trying to make happen. I'm not exactly sure if they will. But guys, out of all the non-conference games, what are some of the ones you were looking forward to the most that it looks like we're not going to get this year?
Outside and some of the rivalry ones, which are always the ones that I look forward to. Honestly, I think the 2 Oregon games, the Ohio State game and the North Dakota State game. I just think that they both are so interesting. I mean, especially with Ohio State going up there, because it was at Autzen, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, Ohio State going to Autzen, and obviously in the Big Ten you have a couple of wild environments there already. But then going up to Autzen, that's just different, especially for the size of the stadium versus Michigan Stadium, which two crazy environments. But Oregon is so much smaller and so much more compact, and it just would have been a good matchup in general because so many people are so optimistic about Oregon. And then I think going in Ohio State, I think they're my favorite to win the national championship this year. And then North Dakota State. I mean, there are just so many questions. And again, I've said multiple times through the past couple of weeks that I have so many questions surrounding Oregon right now that I don't know if I want to say they are number one, the team to beat in the Pac-12. So I don't want to say that because I'm still curious about what we're going to see from the Ducks this year. And I think whenever you've got a bunch of questions going into a game, but for two different teams, I think it's a fun game to watch. And North Dakota State, man, I think that would have been fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a ton of non-conference games that were canceled this year that people were looking forward to. I was looking forward to having like an unbelievable first 2 weeks to start my college football season because Michigan was going to play Washington here in Seattle, which I was planning to go to. And then week 2 was going to be Ohio State, Oregon at Autzen, which is only like a 4.5-hour drive. And I was going to go with a couple friends to that. So those are two I was really looking forward to that got canceled. And then another one is obviously USC, Alabama. I know a couple years ago when those guys played, it was a pretty lopsided game. And I think that even if Alabama was still the favorite, I think it might have been a different story this year in terms of the competition of the actual 60 minutes.
Some of the ones that I'm looking forward to also, obviously, you have the obvious ones. You have Ohio State, Oregon. You have the Bama SC. One of the ones from ASU is they're playing BYU this year. And I was really looking forward to see what the Storm and Mormons could do down in, I think it's down in Tempe this year. Another one, this is a conference game that isn't going to be played at the original venue. Wisconsin and Northwestern were supposed to play at Wrigley this year, which would have been a really cool place to have a football game. But back to the non-conference, sticking with Wisconsin. Wisconsin, Appalachian State, that would have been a really good one, similar to the Oregon, North Dakota State game, where, yes, App State is a Division I team. Yes, they have a better track record than North Dakota State in the D1 level, but that would have been a fun one. And then also Auburn, North Carolina. You know, we saw two great freshman quarterbacks last year from those two schools. Yeah, I said two great freshman quarterbacks. The Bo Nix, Sam Howell head-to-head clash there. Not even them, but Auburn, North Carolina would have been a lot of fun to see this year. I think that was going to be it. That game was going to be in Atlanta also, so a neutral site game.
That's a good point with the quarterbacks, though, because somebody else in the comments pointed out the Alabama USC game, and if you think about it, there's a chance that could have been Keaton Slovis versus Bryce Young, and Bryce Young decommitted from USC the Monday following the USC Stanford game when Slovis came out and was incredible for SC, and like 2 days later, Bryce Young was like, "Yeah, all right, I'm going to Alabama instead."
Yeah, I did a video. That was essentially, I think they were all non-conference games, but it was titled "The 10 Games I'm Looking Forward to the Most Week 1." That I've now changed the title to 10 Games that were canceled because of coronavirus. The game, and I said this in my video, and I said this in our show last week. The game I was looking forward to most, not just week 1 for the entire season non-conference, was Oregon, North Dakota State, because North Dakota State over the last decade is lost 5 games. They've won, I think, 8 of the 9 last national championships, and they've taken down some FBS teams. I know they beat Iowa. I'm blanking on some of the other FBS teams they've taken down, but they haven't been to the extent of Oregon. So I was really excited to see, is North Dakota State legit? Is Trey Lance legit? How are they going to fare against a team like Oregon? How is Oregon going to look against a team like North Dakota State? And I was just really looking forward to that one. And then you go to the next week and Oregon plays Ohio State. I mean, that right there, playoff implications already. Whoever wins that game, they already got the best win of the season, and whoever loses, they might be out of the playoff hunt. So, but I actually got a list and wrote down some of the better ones that we're going to miss out. Obviously, Texas, LSU. That's, a rematch from last year that we could have gotten. SC Bama, that would have been a great one. I like what Josh said about Bryce Young, kind of like SC getting the revenge on him. Clemson, Notre Dame, although that looks like that might happen because Notre Dame might be joining the ACC. Tennessee, Oklahoma, Michigan, Washington, I think Lyle mentioned. I think Lyle said he was going to go to that game. You mentioned at the battle of, the sophomore quarterbacks, Auburn, North Carolina. And there was just a bunch of just really, really good games at North Carolina at UCF. So, I mean, we're missing out on a lot of good games that, it's a drag. Hopefully they're able to reschedule a lot of these ones. Hopefully they can do that. But I'm sure like Oregon, North Dakota State, I don't think they'll be able to reschedule that. And especially with Trey Lance maybe leaving after this year, I'm not exactly sure. So again, hopefully we can reschedule some of these, but those are the games I was looking forward to most, guys.
Oh no, Blake, ASU at UNLV.
Yeah.
Oh, the game I'm really upset about is the fact I can't go to Vegas and not only watch ASU, I can't bet on ASU to win.
I will say this.
I know that would have been the
Oh,
first game. That would have been the first game at the new stadium.
At the new
Because
stadium.
it would have well, I guess technically preseason Raiders games, but this would have been before the NFL season started. So this would have been like the first official game at the new, Allegiant Stadium.
Because UNLV was supposed to play there this year, but then that deal fell through or whatever. So they canceled that game, or they rescheduled it to Sam Boyd Stadium out in Henderson area. And then rescheduled it back to the new stadium because it was a Power 5 team in ASU.
Yeah.
I'll bring this up, and this was an interesting thing that I saw from a buddy of mine here in Indiana. You guys know him, good old Griffin Gonzalez. I'm going to pull up his tweet right here.
Of course.
Indiana, I'm going to read it word for word. Indiana University Athletics website has officially removed all non-conference games from their schedule for 2020 while keeping all Big Ten games. As of now, the first two games on IU's schedule are separated by 36 days. So IU was opening the season playing at Wisconsin. First game of the year, starting off like you've seen them do the last couple of years. They saw, they had a Thursday night game day against Ohio State a couple years ago to start the year. So they're starting off their season, or at least we're supposed to, week one with a conference opponent. So what does a schedule like this do for a team? Do they readjust it and move it later back into the year to the original maybe first day of said conference play?
Well, Brady, this is actually a perfect transition into our next topic, pretty much. It's with the season consisting of only conference games, how long do you think the season should be? So obviously, in Indiana's favor, they're going to have to rearrange the schedule somehow. I don't think they would keep the same schedule, how it currently is like that. So with them doing only conference, guys, because normally it's, nine games you play in conference, then you have 3 non-conference games, I think it is. Should they stick to a 9-game schedule? Maybe add a conference game, make it go to a 10-game schedule. I don't think they're going to be able to make it a 12-game schedule just because, how these conferences are, how they make it work. Maybe lose a game, make it an 8-game schedule. How many games do you think would be the proper amount? And as I mentioned as well, the season looks like it's not going to be starting on time, so maybe the season's already been pushed back to middle September, potentially end of September, which obviously will then take some games out of the equation.
I think... assuming we get a season this year, I would assume that we're going to see games pushed back. Brady just pulled up Gonzo's tweet, and what stands out is that 36-day thing. I don't think that's going to last. I think that the full schedules are going to be redone, and I think that maybe it's simply going to be the first couple of games being pushed back or redone to some extent. I think it should just be 9 games. That way you're either above 500 or you're not. You're just not 500. You're either 5-4 or you're 4-5 if you're going to be close to 500. I'm down for that. But I know that at the NCAA was ESPN put out an article yesterday that they were kind of easing up on the bowl eligibility rules. So I know that I think 2 for some conferences that haven't canceled non-conference, I guess 2 FCS wins still count toward bowl eligibility or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to last either. I think that's something that might hold just for the moment, and then you'll redo some of these rules later. But the fact of the matter is, I think it should be a 9-game schedule and no more than that. I mean, I don't think it needs to be an even number. And I would not be surprised if we don't start college football until late September or October. I mean, there's been no improvement on any of the situations going on. Everyone just seems to be coming up with ideas, and we really haven't seen much improvement over the last couple of weeks. So you try to be optimistic, but I think anything more than 9 games is a stretch.
Yeah, I think 8 makes sense. I mean, if you play 8 games, season gets back, start at the end of September, for example. I mean, speaking on the Power 5 conferences, the most teams in any division of a conference is 7. Like, for example, the SEC that has 14 teams, it's 7 per division. So 7 in the SEC West, 7 in the SEC East. So you play those 7 teams. Now you're, for the most part, for the majority of the season, limiting the bubble even more, and you're really compacting the amount of teams and players you're seeing. For a conference like the Pac-12, it'd be 6. Pac-12 South plays the South. And then for the remaining games, you play a couple teams from the opposite side of the conference. So I think, just to limit the travel, limit the teams you see to a certain extent. But at the same time, while 8 games isn't perfect, usually by week 8 or by the end of week 8 of a college football season, you've got a pretty good idea of who's for real and who isn't. So I think 8 games is pretty feasible.
Yeah, I kind of like what Josh said a second ago with the 9. Have it an odd number, so you either, if your 5-win mark is your bowl mark now. Do it like that. That's got to be a pretty easy way to do it. So say you go 4-4 with 8, you need an odd number of games. It's like you're playing best 2 out of 3. You're playing best 3 out of 5. You need an odd to have it, so one side gets the advantage, and there won't be any teams left out. So I like the odd number with that.
The last thing we need is another 2011 UCLA where they're just below 500, petition to the NCAA to go to a bowl game, and then get granted a bowl game at like 5-7. Like, how does that happen? I just don't understand that. But like that, if you play the 9 games and you don't have an even number of games, you're either below 500 or you're not, and then there's your bowl cutoff right there. And who's to say we even get all of these same bowl games again? I wouldn't be surprised to see like all of these Bahamas Bowl get cut out, and you have kind of the top 2 or 3 tiers of bowl games, and that's it.
You have bowl season, but you have it only at one destined location where every day there's 2 games there.
Hey, it's a bubble bowl. It's
a
bubble
bubble.
bowl.
It's a true bubble bowl. It's a true bubble bowl. I mean, yeah, I think 9. I think that's a good one, just because, as Josh mentioned, is the whole, or I think it was Brady mentioned it, about the whole either you go 5-4, you go 4-5, and then you're bowl eligible. And I think 9 is still a good amount of games. That obviously, if you're going to go in conference, you're going to have to rework that schedule, because there are going to be things where some of these teams, they have not. It's not necessarily all these schools have their 3 non-conference games to start the season. A lot of teams, I think like SC, a lot of the times they'll play Stanford like week 2. I know a lot of these other schools, they'll play non-conference games. They'll play like FCS games, like the SEC schools. They'll play, like Chattanooga. Yeah, not the Cherry Bunny, Cherry Boca Raton Bowl. They'll play, FCS schools like the 2nd, 3rd last week of the season. So then all of a sudden you're having like a massive gap. So the schedule's going to have to be realigned. My guess is you just redo it, and then you have one bye week somewhere in there. But overall, I'd like to see 9. I'd like to see 9. That's just my personal guess. But guys, where to go? Where to go? Here we go. What bowl is your favorite? Josh, take it away.
The Cheribundi Tart Cherry Boca Raton Bowl. And I say this with absolute certainty that I have no idea any team that has played in that bowl game ever. That's false. That was a blatant lie. FAU played in that bowl game, didn't they?
I think so, because we were making fun of Lane Kiffin.
Oh, Lane. I love that guy.
So we miss good old Lane. So, all right, guys. Now, some other ideas we've heard in regards to potentially, changing the schedule and everything. We talked about this last week about how the Ivy League was probably going to adapt this. Well, they officially did, and they're moving all their fall sports, including football, to the spring. We've kind of briefly talked about this in previous shows, but now we can give our in-depth thoughts, more so on this. Let's say they scrap the college football season. It's done in the fall, and they move it to the spring. Now, Ivy League still hasn't mentioned when exactly they want to play. I don't know what their definition of spring is. Would that maybe be early February? Would that be March? Let's just say it's like March 1st. They come back March 1st for spring college football. Do you guys think that this is a good idea? Now, obviously, you can go based on how many games they play. Let's say they maybe play 6 games, and then for the fall, they play 6 games as well. Or they do 8 games in the spring, and they reduce the fall to, 10 games or so, because you can't have a 12-game season in the spring and then a 12-game season in the fall, because a lot of these guys, 24 games over the course of 10 months, that's not going to happen. So if this discussion, because we've heard conferences potentially mentioning this, I forget who it was, but I think some AD from one of the Power 5 schools the other day talked about how they're fully prepared to move to the spring. What are you guys' thoughts on that, potentially moving college football to the spring as opposed to just, trying to play it in the fall?
Personally, I don't think it's the best idea we've heard. My concern now is the same concern I had a couple of days ago that I talked about on the show, and that was what happens if you play football in the spring and say, let's just, for the sake of this topic, let's say you play 9 games. So you're like, okay, you don't want to play a full 12-game slate. We're still doing no non-conference games, but we're going to play more than 6. Let's play 9 games. Everything's in conference, just like the plans are for the fall, but we'll play them in the spring. What happens if you have a guy tear his ACL? Starting quarterback tears his ACL in the 5th game of the year. And now suddenly that injury does not necessarily turn into a season-long injury. That turns into a season-long and off-season and maybe the upcoming season injury. And that's, I think, terrifying for a lot of these players. I would not be surprised if you decided to play college football in the spring. I would not be surprised if you saw a lot of guys think, all right, load management. Or, hey, maybe a lot of guys start doing what they do in bowl games where they're like, I don't want to play the bowl game because I don't want to risk it if I get a chance to play in the NFL. I think it's too close together if you plan on playing college football in the fall. I think that's a serious concern. And the way that I look at it is either play college football this fall or don't play it at all. And it's unfortunate to say, but I think that any lingering injuries from the spring are going to keep guys out in the fall, especially if they're serious. So it's not something I want to say, but if you're not going to play it in the fall, I say don't play it at all. I say wait and take the year off. It's not worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't know how that's enough time for these guys to rest and get healthy. Even the guys that don't have a serious injury, say a spring season played, how is that enough time to rest? I mean, a normal offseason for these guys between last game of the regular season in the fall to first game of the regular season the next fall, it's 7 months. It's not going to be 7 months if you play a spring season and then a fall season. Even if you shorten the games, that just doesn't seem like an adequate enough time for these guys to rest and get healthy.
One of the things that we talked about was the quick turnaround of, say, injuries. But one thing I'll look at now, and something I just thought of, is what about transfers? All right. Someone's playing, say they're doing a grad transfer, say they're doing just a straight up transfer. You go and you have to essentially reevaluate all of these colleges you want to go to. And instead of the 6 to 7 months of time you have in between the end of one season to the next, you have 3.5 to 4 months. That cuts your time in half. Yes, I know this is a very, very different thing, not coronavirus, not COVID, not pandemic. This is, all right, how do these players adapt to this scenario? If they want to change schools, if they get the injury, if they can't play, I think the transfer market and the transfer window will be completely different. I said transfer market, transfer window, like we're talking about soccer here, Josh. But but you look at when a lot of players will transfer, it's middle of summer, very end of the season, but a lot of times it's right in that summer month. So if you're doing that, it gives them a lot of time to weigh their options. This really cuts down that thought process choice, and you really won't see, I'm guessing, a lot of guys transfer because, especially if they do a spring and fall and then just reset normal from there, you're going to have a lot of guys who won't transfer, will stay at the school they're at right now, and then just fight it out. So you really won't have a lot of turnover in college football if you have back-to-back seasons of spring and fall. Just my thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you move it to the spring, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things. Josh mentioned with the injuries. Brady just talked about the whole transfer thing. If you're going to do a spring season, then a fall season, you're going to have to do maybe start the season early, middle February. I mean, you have to play probably, I'd say, at least 8 games. I don't think you can do a season with only 6 games. So even if you have 8 games with a bye, I mean, that's going to go, through early April. And then we have conference championships. If they have that bowls playoff, that goes through middle April, end of April. And even if you make the next season, you make that 10 games, 8 games, you can only push that back so far. So maybe you can push that to early October, maybe middle October. And even if that's the case, you're just having from April to October. That's not a huge gap. So Josh, he hit it kind of perfectly when it's kind of tough to say. If you can't make a season happen, like try everything you can to make a season happen in the fall. But I overall just don't think the Ivy League and all of them, that's fine. I think they're only going to play amongst each other. They're probably going to play 5 or 6 games. Ivy League, it's not as, serious, but for all these other big time programs, I just don't think it's a smart idea playing in the spring. Again, unless they're able to start early February, get 8 games in, and then push the next season back to maybe early October, mid October. But I don't think they do that because I don't think they want to start messing with all the other schedules, especially if come next fall, everything's fine. They can go back to a regular 12-game schedule that starts end of August, early September. So it's a tough thing to really figure out. One other thing, guys, we kind of mentioned this as well. I don't think I put this on the thing, but that's okay. So for these teams, that are like Notre Dame, BYU, I think Notre Dame, they already pretty much said they're going to be playing in the SEC or the ACC. But teams, like BYU, Army, like New Mexico State, Liberty, these teams, and maybe some of these, group of 5 teams where they rely so heavily on these non-conference games. For one, it's a bunch of revenue for the schools. They get like $1 million plus and everything. They might not be able to schedule. So for these teams that are so greatly affected by it, what's like the protocol? What's going to happen with them? Obviously, again, Notre Dame, we kind of know what happens, but for these other teams, just the potential effects it can have, financially and just moving forward with the school.
I think you're going to start seeing a lot of teams do what Notre Dame's going to do, where if Notre Dame plays a full ACC slate, I think you're going to see teams like BYU and New Mexico State play a full Mountain West slate, for example. Army, hey, Blake, maybe Army joins the ACC. I think that realistically you'd see a team like them join the American, maybe. I think that you're going to start seeing more teams like that make moves like what Notre Dame is going to do with the ACC, because they've got to play a full slate, and there are so many teams that especially these teams that are independent, there's a chance that they could struggle to make money, I think. And again, like what we've talked about in the past, a lot of the money doesn't necessarily come from ticket sales. A lot of it comes from TV deals. And I think that, for example, that's not something that Notre Dame, for example, is going to hurt from, because they're going to have all their games on NBC. But they've got to play games. The fact of the matter is they have to play games. And if these independent schools want to make money, they have to play games. So I think you're going to start seeing schools like that join conferences, kind of like Notre Dame is for the season ahead.
I think it's the only option. The only option is to have these guys join other conferences and play games. Otherwise, their whole season's going to be canceled. Yeah, for BYU, I think it makes the most sense that they play in the Mountain West. Or for Army, like Josh said, maybe they join the American. But it's also about having to get those conferences to agree to flex their schedules to let these guys in and let these guys play.
Just let the kids play. Quote Mike Trout, just let the kids play.
Yeah, let the kids play. What was it baseball said? Like, tell us when and where we're ready to play. And then the baseball was like, okay, here's 60 games. And they're like, no, we don't want that. We said tell us when and where, but we pretty much opted out of that. But yeah, I mean, guys, it's
owners and Manfred. I said thanks, owners and Manfred. And
yeah. Thanks, owners and Manfred. Gosh, later with them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see again with Notre Dame. They're kind of in a better position. But what was it like? I think BYU, where it was like BYU's already lost their entire schedule almost. They lost nearly their entire schedule, and they haven't been able to resolve it. So we're gonna have to wait and see. But it's time now to move into Q&A, guys. We're gonna do Q&A for about 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, unless there's anything else, I think we pretty much covered everything we possibly could. I don't know if we missed anything. If there's anything you guys want to briefly bring up or mention.
No,
I think we touched on it pretty well.
Yeah.
Wear a mask.
All right. Yeah, just wear a mask.
Just wear
a
a mask.
mask. All right,
That's
so
it. Wear a mask.
We're doing a Q&A right now. Let's see if we even have any questions that have come in yet. I guess people are debating Ohio State and Penn State. I guess they're really going at it in the comments.
Only one of those schools has made the playoff. That's all you got to say.
Yeah, so, I mean, Ohio State, look at the resume every year, so there you go. There's our answer. Ohio State, they're the better team, so you guys can officially stop arguing and be civil there in the comments. Do you guys think the college football needs a commissioner?
Paula Bovin for commissioner.
Yes, I agree. I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. It depends, because I saw another comment, which, I hope I'm not ruining a potential future Q&A question that we could get in a couple minutes. But somebody pointed out, what about a players union? Like, I know they're not making money, but for example, I have a buddy that went to Cal State San Marcos. He ran track and field, and for the first couple of years, I don't know the whole extent of what his role was, but he would travel the country and go to these NCAA conferences. Why can't college football have something like that with the players? I think that's something that's super important. And I think that maybe if we had something like that, something kind of like a players union, this debate about paying players for revenue or their likeness or things like that, like, this would be a different debate if we had a players union or a players yearly conference or something like that. But I think that's more necessary than a commissioner for college football, because you already have the playoff committee, which obviously just selects who goes to the playoff, but they've made that structure. That committee structured the playoff to be the way that it is. And then I think you also have the higher ups in the NCAA, whether you like that or not. I think you have some sort of structure without that figurehead. And I think a players union is more important now rather than a single figurehead at the top serving as the commissioner for everybody else. It's a good question, though.
I like that.
I'm good on having a commissioner. And when I say I'm good, I mean I'm against it. Like, the NCAA, so many people argue, like, so greatly abuses their power to begin with anyway. To put a commissioner in charge might only, like, kind of amplify that. And then you look at pro sports and their commissioners. Like, there are a few that have done pretty good jobs, but usually you hear a lot more complaints about commissioners than you do compliments. So I feel like in a organization like the NCAA, who already doesn't pay their players, for example, to have a commissioner,
supposedly,
I think that would make it worse.
Allegedly.
Well,
Allegedly. Who gave Blake the big square? Okay.
Sorry, I forgot that, you just click on this. It can't go to whoever's talking.
Yeah,
it just goes to whatever. Plus, I'm playing with these buttons. They're kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like, look at this. We're having a good time, guys. We're having a good time.
I can control it too. Like,
making me dizzy.
I control it too. I think the commissioner is an interesting idea. I think it's one of those things where, like Lyle said a second ago, a lot of commissioners you see at professional sports levels are scrutinized for the job they do. It's got to be one of the hardest jobs in all of sports, because you have to try to please everybody. You have to try to please, say you're in the NFL, 32 billionaires and a bunch of the athletes as well. And you can't please everybody. You just can't do it. So I kind of like Josh's idea of the player union. How would you do it, though? Would you have, like, what, 2 guys from each conference join in?
Yeah.
Would you have them? But then how do you choose, like, all right, who's the head of the players union? Who's that? There could obviously be a committee, but it would have to be a very short-term committee, because the most you're spending at one of these schools, realistically, is 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of things you can do. It would be tough. How are there only 50 people here? These people are the best. Let's give them some credit. Thank you, Henry. I assume he's talking about us being the best, unless he's talking about the comments, but who knows? Thanks, Henry. This is an interesting one, guys. Do you think the virus will cause any major D1 schools to close their doors? Something I kind of, when I thought about this, remember how for March Madness, essentially, they're going to play without fans. Everything was fine. And then I think it was like Kansas or Duke. I can't remember exactly who was the first, but one of those blue bloods, they came out and they pretty much said, we're pulling out of the tournament. And after they did that, a bunch of schools kind of followed suit.
Kansas.
So I'm just saying, so it was Kansas. So what happens?
It was Duke. I think.
Oh, it was Duke?
Yeah.
I think they both did, but one of them was first. So what happens if Ohio State, they just come out and they say, we're pulling our team, like, we're not playing? Do you think that there can be like a domino effect where we might see like a bunch of schools kind of follow suit of that?
I think all it takes is one.
Yeah.
I think all it takes is one blue blood program to make that first move. I think that's really all it takes. One of these schools says we're not going to play, and especially if it's like an Ohio State, for example. Let's say Ohio State says we're not playing this year, and then Michigan, even though if they played, they wouldn't lose to Ohio State this year. They'd say, okay, well, if Ohio State's not playing, then we're good. And I think very quickly you would see a lot of these top schools back out, because I think there's still so many questions, because I don't think many people really know what's going on right now, or how much better things are going to be in 2 months, for example. But it's tough. I think that a lot of people want to say that we're going to play college football this fall, but if we're not, which would be smart to not, I really think that just saying we're not going to play is the smart decision, even though I think it's way too early to say that. If somebody says we're not going to play this year, I think
Yeah, I think Josh said it pretty well. I mean, if one of these powerhouse schools opts out, I think everybody kind of starts to follow.
Honestly, I don't even think it needs to be a blue blood, elite, top, best of the best Power 5 school. It could be, I don't want to say a bottom of the barrel because that's disgracing one of these teams, but it could be like even a Rutgers who has not been good in the last 10 years come out and say, we're not going to play. And then that throws a wrench in the entire Big Ten rescheduling, because they don't have to go reorganize the schedule. So it doesn't matter if it's one of these top programs. It could be a smaller program or a lower level Power 5 program. Say we're not going to play, and you're going to have a lot of these, commissioners, these heads of each conference say, well, if this one school is not going to play, you're going to have the backs of your schools, because the schools are what make you the money in the conference. So you're going to have the backs of these schools. You can't be like, screw Rutgers, we don't need them, let's just keep playing our own. It's going to lead to a lot more self-reflection from the schools and from the divisions and conferences as a whole.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where now it's no one wants to be the first team. No one wants to be the first team that makes this, huge decision. But I feel like if one team, again, it could be, someone like Oregon State. It could be a team like that where it's just a small school, and then all of a sudden the dominoes, they fall.
I will say this. No one wants to be the first, but once the first one falls, no one's going to want to be the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one wants to hold out and be like, no, we're fine. We're fine. We're fine.
Yeah, I do think it's early. I do think it is early. It's worth bringing up, but I do think it's early to say definitively what we think is going to happen with this. But for example, UCLA was the first Pac-12 school to say in the spring when all of this first started. UCLA was the first school to say, hey, we're closing down all of our games for the rest of spring for all of our sports, winter and spring sports. We're done. We're playing them with closed doors. And USC immediately was right behind him and said, yep, us too. And I was out shooting something for Cronkite News, and a Sun Devil Athletics official who I'm not going to name was in attendance wherever I was working. And she was telling me that ASU is on the verge of doing the exact same thing, as is U of A. UCLA set that precedent, and the big thing is now what's the rest of the Pac-12 going to do? And obviously UCLA said, we're closing everything down. USC, like 2 or 3 days later, said us too. And at the time, which was only 3 or 4 days after that, ASU and U of A were both prepared to do the same thing because UCLA set that precedent.
Yeah, so all it takes is the first, and then dominoes will fall. Guys, some news happened a few weeks ago that I don't know how we didn't even mention it, but UConn, they're independent now. I don't know if you guys heard about this. They're now in the independent. So what conference, if they were to join a conference again, now you guys don't have to go in depth on this because it's just a fun which one. What conference do you think UConn should go join?
American.
Just send them back to where they were.
Just go back to or
Ivy League. I
don't think UConn's going to the Ivy League.
Yeah. They'll lose to the Ivy League teams.
Yeah, they would.
Hey, you want to ramp up the ACC basketball slate even more? Move them to the ACC. For football, sure. Move them back to the American.
Yeah, no, you keep them. You keep them independent. This is an interesting question, though, guys. Do y'all think the players that would be able to opt out, or do y'all think the players would be able to opt out without losing their scholarships. Now that could be a tough, tricky one where, they're getting a free ride to play football. But if they say, hey, I'm not playing football, it's ooh. That could get dangerous.
This is different than an injury. You get injured doing or playing that sport, you still keep your scholarship. This, you say, I refuse to play the sport that you, the school, recruited me and gave me a full ride scholarship to play. I don't think they should be taken away. I think, you got the scholarship offered to you. You got the level of prestige that you have because you are good at what you do. But for the safety of yourself, you do not want to play. So who was it? Derek King that decided he was going to be sitting out this last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, he kept his scholarship because, he didn't want to get hurt because he thought he could have good draft stock or wanted to transfer. This is much different. This is much different than breaking your arm, tearing your ACL, doing something like that. This is much different than that.
I don't think it would be criminal if these schools were forced to take these scholarships away from their players, if the NCAA mandated that, because these guys aren't making money. This is something we talked about earlier. What if these players, because it's not fair to me or my family, and then they lose their scholarship? I think it should simply be your eligibility is just put on pause. So if you want to, for example, still get your education that year and you want to take online classes, great. I think you should do that. I think that should be welcomed. But I think their eligibility with that scholarship should immediately be put on pause.
Yeah, agreed. And if the NCAA and these schools really did start taking scholarships from these guys opting out, and there were a lot of players opting out, things could get really chaotic, and to the point you might have guys just faking injuries as a way to save their eligibility. And then you have, battles between, athletic directors and the higher ups at colleges versus the players. And I think that could all get really crazy. But I mean, again, like Josh said, it would be terrible, and pretty much borderline criminal in the first place if these players were going to opt out and didn't get to save their scholarship.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, BK.
I started the whole conversation, so you didn't need to come back to me.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, pretty much it's a tough one. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole debate thing, but I'm under the whole thing about how
I was going to say our reign of ruling college football ended on Tuesday.
Our reign.
Yes.
No, I'm on the side where I don't think college players should get paid, again, just because they are getting a free education, they're getting free housing, they're getting free food, and they get a monthly stipend. I get how all the work they're putting in. So those are my thoughts, where I don't think players should get paid. If they're opting out, it's a tough one, because you can't really fault them for opting out because they want to be safe and healthy. It's tough. I mean, it's really a tough one. I mean, I can't say like you take away half their scholarship, like they're on half scholarship, or they're only having to pay half. I don't know. But that'll be interesting to see if that happens. If we see that happen, where guys, because there are going to be players that opt out, like for sure. If there's a season, there's going to be players that opt out. And what will the school do with their scholarships? I'm sure a bunch of these schools, they'll be different. Some schools, they'll let them keep their scholarships, but I wouldn't be shocked if some of them come out and they say, or taking away your scholarship. But yeah, guys, I think that wraps up the Q&A, because for whatever reason, the Penn State-Ohio State discussion, that thing just kept on going. That kept on going in the chat. So yeah, Ohio State, Penn State, who knows? But that wraps up this edition of the Harris Highlight Show. Again, make sure to go follow the show on Twitter at the HH_. You guys can keep up to date with us. You can say what the latest is going on. If we ever do additional shows in the coming future, you guys will know. You guys will get to make sure you check those out. And plus, we do a bunch of fun stuff over there as well. Make sure you guys go vote in the poll for who has the best ACC conference realignment. Guys, pretty much that's it for the most part. Make sure you catch our trivia show next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I've said this before. If you guys would like to ask us a question in the show, probably going to have to be like a pre-recording, send a DM to our Twitter at the HH_. If you're interested in asking us a trivia question, make sure they're good trivia questions. We're not going to put it in the show just because you send in the video. Make sure it's a trivia question. Make sure it's a somewhat trivia question that we could know, where it's not just like, who was Penn State's quarterback in 1980 and how many passing yards do they have? Like, make it where we have a realistic guess where, we have a chance, though we're all just like not curious. So make it a good trivia question. Again, you have a few days to figure that out. Make sure you get those in by Tuesday, but hit us up at the HH_. Again, if you guys want to receive some exclusive behind the scenes benefits, you can go over to our Patreon page. That's in link in the description below. For $1 a month, you could be entered into a contest to pretty much have a one-on-one Zoom call with the four of us where you could talk about whatever. It's only $1 a month. For $3 a month, you can win some exclusive benefits as well. Yes, Brady?
The Penn State quarterback in 1980 was Todd Blackledge.
Was it actually?
It was Todd Blackledge. He threw 7 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, had 1,037 yards. They went 10-2 and finished 8th in the bowl, and they won the Fiesta Bowl 31-19 against Ohio State. They were an independent at the time.
Oh, in the
Sounds
olden
like
days,
they ran the ball a lot.
Yeah, they did.
in the olden days, those numbers win you a Heisman.
Yeah.
No kidding.
It was Todd
No
Blackledge.
kidding. That's fantastic. But yeah, again, follow us on Twitter at the HH_trivia next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. You don't want to miss that. Hopefully by Tuesday, they haven't canceled the college football season yet. Hopefully we still have some hope in regards to that. But for Josh Schaefer, Lyle Goldstein, Brady Klein, this has been Blake Harris. You guys can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search the Harris Highlight Show. The link's in the description as well. You can give us a listen over there. Give this video a thumbs up, and we will see you guys right back here Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern.